Venus and Adonis was painted sometime in the mid-1630s by Flemish Baroque painter Peter Paul Rubens. As a characteristic Baroque painting, Venus and Adonis contains several Baroque elements, including deep colors, an intense contrast between light and shadows, and a depiction of the major dramatic point with its respective narrative. Rubens' painting is based on the myth of Venus and Adonis from Book 10 of Metamorphoses by the poet Ovid. In the myth, the goddess Venus falls in love with the human Adonis after Venus' son Cupid accidentally cuts her on the breast with one of his arrows. Venus becomes so infatuated with Adonis that her demeanor and much of her daily life completely changes. Venus later departs for the city of Cyprus, leaving Adonis with a warning of the dangers associated with hunting larger beasts. After she had gone, however, Adonis ignored her warning and began hunting an enormous boar that ended up goring him with its tusks. Venus returned to Adonis' side after hearing his cries of pain and found him dead. She then turned his blood into the anemone flower, a red flower with a characteristically short lifespan to honor his memory. Rubens' depiction of Venus and Adonis is different from Ovid's myth because it shows the moment in which Adonis is deciding whether or not to leave Venus for the hunt, while Venus and Cupid attempt to hold him back from leaving. This scene did not occur in the myth because Venus had left for Cyprus when Adonis decided to hunt the boar, so she wasn't present to physically prevent him from leaving. This disparity between the narrative of the myth and the narrative of the painting reveals a role reversal in the painting that places Adonis, the human, in a place of power over the goddess Venus because he is a man. In Rubens' painting, Venus is depicted to seem more dependent and emotionally vulnerable. She leans in toward Adonis and has to face upwards to look at his face. She is positioned lower than Adonis to emphasize the fact that he is in control. Venus' nudity, when compared to Adonis' clothed figure, also serves to make her seem more vulnerable and at Adonis' mercy. Adonis, meanwhile, holds power over Venus in Rubens' painting because he is the one deciding whether or not to abandon her for the hunt. This is evident in the painting because half of his body faces towards Venus and Cupid, and the other half faces away from them and towards his hunting dogs. Similarly, his right hand extends toward his lover and her son, but his left hand extends toward the wilderness and he grips his spear. It also seems like Adonis is staring off into the distance, contemplating his decision, which makes him seem less dependent than Venus because he isn't looking at her face in the same way that she is. By depicting Venus as lower than Adonis, Rubens detracts from her godliness to make her seem more human, while simultaneously elevating Adonis to the level of a god because he holds more power than Venus does in this scene. Ovid's myth, of course, treats the power dynamic differently because Venus is a goddess, and she had left Adonis when he decided to hunt. In the myth, she warns him about the dangerous beasts, but then leaves him. So here she wasn't so dependent on him, and she didn't expose herself to him in the same way that she does in the painting. This reversal of power between the goddess and the mortal man in the painting could only be due to the fact that Adonis is male and Venus is female, which capitalizes on the sexist nature of Rubens' cultural reality.